disseminated in our universities is overwhelmingly intellectually empty, incoherent, and dishonest. This whole reason for being depends on an activist orientation towards women's position in society.
Men's rights! Now!
Men's rights!
Rose before home! Rose before home!
Maintain our privilege! When do we want it? Now!
So it must always find new wars to fight, new sources of inequality to decry, and that also means, therefore, that the discipline can't really be at base about the pursuit of truth. It must always be advancing its ideological agenda, maintaining its worldview, whatever means necessary. There just aren't that many legitimate enemies around, especially in the academy anymore. A fact that undoubtedly contributed to the silliness we saw last November at Warren Farrell's talk, when a man who isn't an enemy of woman, a man who merely dissents from some tenets of what has sometimes been called rape crisis feminism, is treated as if he were a dangerous villain and author of hate speech. The sheer frivolousness of this branch of feminism is revealed when students are so falsely invested in some idea of being oppressed by the patriarchy that they feel justified in hurling abuse at those attempting to attend the talk, and actually give the Heil Hitler salute to the police officers attempting to keep order at the event, as if there were any remote equivalence between the position of students protesting at the University of Toronto and the position of Jews under Nazi totalitarianism. That hollow self-posturing is laughable and pitiable. But the fundamental feminist tenet remains that all cultures are patriarchies that support and maintain men's power and perspectives at the expense of women's power and perspectives, often through violence, threats of violence, or other more subtle forms of control. The woman interviewed in the Metro argued that I was wrong to blame feminists for men's anger, or to encourage men to blame feminists, because feminists, she said, are actually on the side of men, concerned about men's issues. According to this woman, the patriarchy hurts men too, because it, quote, confines them to narrow gender roles, causing the very problems the men's issues groups are trying to address. And according to her, the men's issues groups are addressing these problems incorrectly. Feminists have the answer.
Two of my friends committed suicide, and I want the peace of understanding why that happened.
Why this space to talk about that? Feminism, for example, offers lots of spaces to talk about mental health issues, talk about depression, both in men, women, and people who don't identify within the binary.
And so I really thought about that. Are feminists concerned about the disadvantages of men in our society, the harms that they experience? What about the harms of a family law system that overwhelmingly awards custody to the mother and denies the father's rights and claims to be involved in his children's lives?
She has full custody of my son and of my daughter. I was left with $75 a week to live off of. I was in a shelter, crying my eyes out, wondering what I was going to do next. And
the minute I got separated, I pretty much lost my kid. I only see them 2 hours every 2 weeks.
The mother got sole custody of my boys. 18 months after that final order, the CAS apprehended my children and they put them in foster care, so I had to go back to court and fight for my boys again. And I ended up getting the boys.
So I just had a friend who, after 28 years of marriage, he gave up basically his career for his wife, and he was treated as if he was a 25-year-old and given 2 years of alimony when a woman in the exact same place would have been given 15 to 20 years of alimony.
I went looking for my son, my time with my son. That's it. That's all. I spent 10 years with not having, I don't know if that makes sense, not having a court date. I was knocking my head against the wall. It was a nightmare. It really was a nightmare.
Well, what about the harm of a criminal justice system in which police officers now, almost without exception, will charge a man with assault if his intimate partner claims that he has assaulted her, even with no evidence for the charge? What about the harms of an affirmative action hiring system widely practiced in government and academia, in which men are systematically disadvantaged, passed over time and time again in hiring competitions in favor of women, often less qualified women, all in the name, of course, of gender equality? What about the harm of a society that institutionalizes the concern about violence against women, sometimes, often explicitly labeled male violence against women, but doesn't talk about violence against men? Are these the harms that are caused by the patriarchal system? Or are they the result of a biased feminist worldview which has significantly permeated the media, the justice system, academia, and the family law system? This is a discipline that has come entirely unmoored from any responsible framework of scholarship and cannot claim academic legitimacy. And I think this is a real shame, because obviously there is a great deal to learn about women's experience historically, women's artistic expression, women's cultural production across the world. But women's studies is not only not teaching this well, but is actually preventing learning by substituting a callow set of slogans for real thought and substituting a smug sense of oppositionality, woundedness, and bitterness for the intellectual curiosity, openness to ideas, and eagerness to pursue truth that university education in the humanities is supposed to produce. Rather than giving students a well-informed, balanced understanding of the world they live in, academic feminism dwells obsessively upon group grievance, on the wounds of history and the injustices of the present.
For thousands of years have been by men. It wasn't until 40 or 50 years ago that they couldn't get to vote.
I can literally go on and on for hours about the empirical evidence that demonstrates the lack of equality.
I'm a Ryerson social work student, a damn proud feminist. All men are not equal, unfortunately.
Its unbalanced worldview prevents rational discussion about a range of pressing social issues, substituting melodramatic and debate-ending cries of sexism or racism for fair-minded analysis of the merits of an argument.
Absolutely atrocious! And it is
That is
not
not
true!
empirically true.
That
Back it up.
It seemed that the man before me had much more time to ask his question. Oh my, okay.
It is a reactionary dogma insisting on ideological conformity and vicious in its personal attacks on those who disagree with any of its claims. It teaches contempt for the freedoms, tolerance, and generosity of our own admittedly imperfect society, while fostering a corresponding naivete about conditions in other cultures and a misconception of the unprecedented opportunities for self-fulfillment and security that women have achieved in Canada. As such, women's studies fails to equip young people to recognize what is worth preserving in our culture, how we came to be where we are, and how to make decisions about the future. So my challenge to you all tonight is to be true scholars, real thinkers, genuine intellectuals. Do not mistake self-righteousness for scholarly passion. It's an intoxicating emotion, but it is ultimately hollow and unreliable. Believe in yourself and your cause. I'm not sure that the tide of feminist propaganda that has had such a culture-wide impact on Canadian society can be turned back anytime soon. But it starts one person at a time, and it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
What is the biggest social cost for women?
We have now created a society in which men are more and more feeling like the disposable and the unwanted sex. That's not a good thing for women. If men feel that they don't have a place in society, that their particular abilities aren't valued, then they aren't going to contribute to society, and that hurts everyone.
Well, I believe, yeah, I believe I'll dust my boots. I'm gonna leave here running. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I ain't got nothing left but the blues, and the blues ain't nothing to me and you. That don't make no sense, man. Hey, wolves, well, I hear the dogs begin to howl, the hounds begin to bark. That's how messed up I am. Hey, hear that? Hear the bird? Point that up. Get the birds. Black rose in the meadow, across the broad highway. Black rose in the meadow, across the broad highway. They're singing. Well, it's funny, honey, but I don't feel much like a scarecrow today. You should be catching the birds, man, not me.